Hello and welcome to class. Today I wanted to talk about English sentence structure, which is one of the best tools to increase your sentence variety and your English fluency, especially in your writing or academic writing. Now, this lesson will go from the smallest section of a sentence and just increase in complexity as we go. So we're going to start with the smallest bits, the subject and the predicate. All English sentences must have a subject and a predicate. They always do, a full sentence. If it isn't two words, it's an interjection, like hey or ow. That's considered a full sentence. But outside of interjections, all English sentences must have a subject and a predicate. The subject is the person or the thing, the noun, that does the action of the verb. So the subject and the predicate, which is the verb, always have a relationship. The simplest form of a sentence is just the subject and the predicate, like Alex walks. She ran. Alex and she are the subjects of the sentences. Walks and ran are the predicate. Those are the verbs. John will come. The baby cries. The students thought. The workers rested. Very simple sentences. Common ESL errors are to leave out the subject, especially from one sentence to the next. For example, I like tennis very much. Is my favorite sport. It should be, I like tennis very much. It is my favorite sport. Or tennis is my favorite sport. You forgot the subject in the second sentence. Also, a common error is inverting the subject and the verb, putting them in the wrong order. For example, I am not sure where is Ypsilanti. It should say, I am not sure where Ypsilanti is. Where Ypsilanti is. Now, objects are nouns or pronouns that receive the action. So object, that is the new piece we're adding here. We have the subject, the verb or the predicate, and the object. Now the object can receive the action or be the thing to whom the action is done. For instance, the children read a book. John read a story to the children. Okay, so this is what the verb is happening to whom the action is done. A phrase is a group of words. So we're moving from single words, subject, predicate, and object, onto a group of words. That's a phrase. A phrase is a group of words that does not contain both a subject and a verb. So it is not a full sentence. More than one word, but smaller than a sentence, okay? Most often we'll see noun phrases or verb phrases or prepositional phrases. Here are some examples. The red grammar book is lying on the coffee table. The red grammar book is the noun phrase. The red grammar book. That's not a full sentence. There's no verb. But it does tell us, it's a phrase, it tells us something. Is lying on the coffee table is our verb phrase. Is lying on the coffee table. That's not a full sentence because there's no subject. What is lying on the coffee table? It's the red grammar book. So putting those together gives us a full sentence. On the coffee table is a prepositional phrase. And the coffee table is a noun phrase. Now, you don't need to know the differences between the noun phrase, verb phrase, and prepositional phrase. It's important to know the subject and the predicate especially. These other terms can be helpful, but just focus on the subject and the predicate. While we move on to the most important tools to increase sentence fluency and variety, which are the clauses. Now, clause. A clause is a group of words with both a subject and a verb. But an independent clause has a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. It's a complete sentence on its own. A dependent clause does not express a complete thought because it's dependent on another clause to finish the sentence. Independent clause and dependent clause. We're going to spend a lot of time with these today. Now, let's take a look here at this passage. I'm going to read it through and see if you can tell which one is the independent clause and which color, is the dependent clause. Is the world getting us more distracted? More often than not, it feels that way. Our digital devices are buzzing at all times. World news demands our attention 24/7, and there are countless entertainment opportunities than ever before. With that, it certainly seems harder to focus on what's really important. While distracted driving can kill, understanding how to stay focused is exactly what it takes to get things done and to get ahead. Can you tell which is which? I'll tell you, the green is the independent clause, because those clauses can stand on their own. The dependent clauses are the reddish color more often than not. With that, while distracted driving can kill, they're not full sentences. You're always waiting to hear more. There's always an independent clause in a full sentence. There's always an independent clause in a full sentence. Dependent clauses can be added to independent clauses to make more complex sentences. And that's where we're going to get into. But if there's still some confusion on independent and dependent clauses, I recommend typing in this website. There's a great practice quiz. Let's move on to the types of sentences. There are 4 that we're going to talk about. Simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and compound complex sentences. Okay? You want to use a variety of everything. You don't want to use compound complex sentences all the time, or you'll sound long-winded. You don't want to use simple sentences all the time, or you'll sound short and clipped. You want a mix of all the sentences. So let's go through the types together. Simple sentences have one independent clause. It's possible to have multiple subjects and multiple verbs, but there's still only one subject-verb relationship. So let's look at the examples. Washington was the first U.S. president. That's a simple sentence. Washington and Lincoln were U.S. presidents. Still, just multiple subjects, one verb, but still a simple sentence. Washington was president in 1789 and served for 8 years. Washington and Lincoln dedicated their lives to the U.S. and worked hard to build a better country. You can see how even a simple sentence you can do a lot with. So let's take a look here. What's the subject and what's the predicate? It will get more difficult as we go. So Washington was the first U.S. president. The subject is Washington. The predicate is was. Washington and Lincoln were U.S. presidents. The subject is Washington and Lincoln, and the verb or the predicate is were. They were. Washington was president in 1789 and served for 8 years. The subject is Washington, and there are 2 predicates, Washington was and Washington served. You see there are 2 verbs, but still only one relationship. Washington was and Washington served. The last sentence. Washington and Lincoln dedicated their lives to the U.S. and worked hard to build a better country. The subject Washington and Lincoln. And they dedicated and they worked. Those are the predicates. Compound sentences. So from simple sentences to compound sentences contain two independent clauses. So the two clauses are normally connected by a comma and a coordinating conjunction, such as for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. So let's look at the examples. Washington died in 1799 and Lincoln was born in 1809. Washington died in 1799 before Lincoln's birth. So these two famous citizens never met each other. So you can see the relationships are different. What are the subjects and what are the predicates here in the first sentence? It's Washington died and Lincoln was. It's not Washington was or Lincoln died. You see, they are separate. They are separate. Washington died and Lincoln was. The other sentence here. What are the subjects and what are the predicates? Washington died. Citizens met. These two famous citizens never met each other. Okay? Moving on to complex sentences. Complex sentences have one independent clause and at least one dependent clause. Generally, complex sentences are going to be the best transitional sentences. Good for the starts of paragraphs in an essay if you're academic writing. Let's look at our example sentences. The last runner collapsed at the finish line because she had run for more than 2 hours. You see the subject, runner, collapsed because she had run. The runner who crossed the finish line last had run for more than 2 hours. The subject is the runner who, and the predicate is crossed and had run. Now, the question for you is to locate the dependent and independent clauses. Remember back, independent can stay on its own and dependent cannot. Take a look at these sentences. Pause the video if you need to. And I'll show you the answers here. The dependent clause is because she had run for more than 2 hours. We know that that can't stay on its own with the because. Because she had run for more than 2 hours, we want to hear more. We need to hear more. We don't understand. That's not a finished sentence. What about the second one? It's a little more difficult. Who crossed the finish line last? The runner who had crossed the finish line last had run for more than 2 hours. A little difficult there. I hope you caught it. Now, how about compound complex sentences? A compound complex sentence has two independent clauses and at least one dependent clause. The last runner collapsed at the finish line because she had run for more than 2 hours, so a medical team examined her. That's a long sentence. Washington died in 1799 before Lincoln's birth, which was in 1809, so those two famous citizens never met each other. Let's take a look. Pause if you need to. See if you can locate the independent clauses and the dependent clauses. I'll show you the answers now. Because she had run for more than 2 hours. And in the second sentence, the dependent clause is which was in 1809. Okay? Now here's an overall chart, okay? A summary of all the types of sentences. So you can take a look and try to Spice up your sentences using independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses. Because, which, therefore. Take a look at those conjunctions. Will help inspire you to expand your sentences. Now, the easiest way to increase your writing fluency, of course, is by choosing a variety of sentence structures, and you need to practice that. So to end the video, if you'd like, I have a final activity for you, which is to write a response using at least one type of each type of sentence, okay? Is social media bad for people? That's the little paragraph that we read earlier we started. I want you to respond. Is social media bad for people? Try to use independent and dependent clauses in your writing. Thank you so much for watching the video, and take care. Bye.